All right, we are back here on the podcast. It is divisional weekend. Unfortunately, the Jets are not in again. Looks like they have a mandate to unofficially get back in the playoffs next year. Join me today to talk some Jets football. We talked to him prior to the season. Justin Freed of the Jet Press is back with us. Justin, how are you?
I'm doing all right, Mike. I appreciate you having me back on.
Yeah, thanks for coming back on here. And obviously, this is a wild ride of a season for the Jets here. I mean, they start out, we have the wild first 3 weeks of Flacco. They come back in. Zach Wilson comes in. They're 5-2, and then everything pretty much goes to hell after the Mike White return. Like, general thoughts on this year and how, especially particularly how it ended here.
Yeah, it's disappointing the way that it ended. Like you said, they started 5-2, 6-3, 7-4. Like everyone was thinking playoffs. There was even a point where it's like, hey, they can compete for the division. And unfortunately, then it just kind of all went downhill in the second half of the year. I've been saying I think the Jets kind of simultaneously overachieved and underachieved at the same time this year. They overachieved in the sense that they were competing for the playoffs for the majority of the season. They were 7-4, they were 6-3, talking a division. They were playing meaningful December and even a meaningful January game. Unfortunately, they also underachieved because even though that all happened, they still fell short of the playoffs. They lost their last 6 games of the year, and really, this team should have been in the playoffs. Like, this was a playoff caliber roster. Unfortunately, they just had a letdown at the quarterback position, amongst other things that prevented them from reaching it. So it's a disappointing end to the year, but overall, I think you can say the season was a success. But it's one of those where, again, I think they overachieved and underachieved at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, if you told us back in like August, we were talking here, they'll be 7-10, but they'll be right in the hunt at the end of the season. You're like, great, I was signing for this right now. But when you go 7-4 and lose 6 straight, how does that change how the taste feels a little bit?
Exactly, and of course, you throw in that Zach Wilson kind of just completely failed in his second year as the Jets quarterback. I think that also weighs into the fact that even if they did finish 7-10 and lost their last 6 games, if Zach Wilson had showed promise, it'd be a very different narrative than it is now.
It absolutely is here. And obviously, when you go from 7-4 and in a lock playoff spot 7-10 out of it, Woody John's not going to sit here and let that go idly by. And somebody paid the price in the form of Mike LaFleur being let go is a mutual decision, according to the team, where he had opportunity to decide to let it pursue them here. Do you think this was the correct decision to let LaFleur go after this year?
See, I feel like I'm in the minority because I've long been a Mike LaFleur defender. I don't think that he is or I should say was at this point, was a perfect offensive coordinator with the Jets, not even close. I wouldn't even say that he was probably close to league average in my mind. But I do think that he was kind of made the scapegoat of the situation. He dealt with the worst quarterback play in the league over the last 2 seasons. An offensive line that, over the final few games of the year was just a train wreck. It wasn't a great situation for him. That's not to say there weren't things he could have done differently. And of course, I think that he and the entire offense deserves criticism for their red zone struggles. I think he deserves criticism. Of course, he will take some heat for the lack of development of Zach Wilson. I think that also partially falls on him. Overall, though, I think he built a scheme that works, and we've seen that if the Jets even get semi-competent quarterback play, this system, or that system, I should say, did work. Unfortunately, they just received that very, very infrequently over the last 2 seasons. So I do think that overall, no, I don't think they should have fired Mike LaFleur, but, we'll see who they hire. They could come out on top of the situation.
Yeah, the LaFleur thing was interesting. Remember, I think after week 17, remember he came out publicly as the first one to say, we made mistakes in the organization not having a veteran quarterback in here for Zach Wilson, and went to mentor and let him sit behind the guy and learn for a little bit, which I read between the tea leaves and I said, I think he knows he's on thin ice here, and he's just sort of adding his side of the narrative out in case he gets let go. So I did think it was interesting that sort of came right after the season ended. Yeah,
I think during LaFleur's entire tenure, he had a tendency to say things in front of an open mic that he probably shouldn't say, and that was definitely one of those. I have no idea if that would have even contributed to him being let go, but I don't think people in the organization were super happy about him saying that. I know he had the Mekhi Becton comments earlier in the summer that kind of rubbed some people the wrong way. So, he had a tendency to do that.
Yeah, I think the challenge with praising LaFleur is obviously, they love this system they're in, that they love the thing here, the West Coast Shanahan system here. But the problem is here, it's you're basically walking into a year next year where Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas have to win to get in the playoffs. And if they don't, they might be gone, which is a tough sell for potential coordinator here with, you might not have a job in a year. I like the fact that they're open to potentially, looking at other candidates here, but like, do you think it's going to be an easy job for them to fill?
No, I think that there's definitely some stuff to like about the job. Obviously, you have a very good young core, especially on that offense. You got guys like Brees Hall, Garrett Wilson, still have Elijah Moore there. Plus, you have a great defense, which that always helps out the offense if you have a great defense. But like you said, I don't think it's going to be the most appealing coordinator job out there, mostly because of job security. You just mentioned it, but this very well could be a one and done job. If the offensive coordinator comes in here and the Jets fail to make the playoffs in 2023, or they fall short of expectations and everybody's let go, that's it. You're here for 1 year and you're gone. And I think, Woody Johnson could throw as much money at the coordinator as he wants. He could throw as much money at the coach. You could sell them on, hey, we got a good young core. But if you can't guarantee that guy's going to be here for longer than a year, even if the offense isn't bad, that's a problem. And I think, unfortunately, that is going to work against the Jets. Not to mention, there's just not a ton of great candidates out there that I think would consider offensive coordinator positions right now.
Yeah, I mean, you look at some of the names they're linked to already, and I mean, obviously Darrell Bevel is the big name because he's had ties to Saleh in that system, but you're looking at some of these other guys like Nick Caley, the Patriot tight end coach, you look at Kevin Patullo, the Eagle quarterback coach here. This feels like a spot where, if Bevel doesn't take it, you're looking at maybe a situation where, this is somebody who's young, looking for their first time being a coordinator, which is basically what you had in LaFleur, and just getting a different perspective on it.
Right, exactly. And that's the whole thing is that the Jets made a point of emphasis to be we want to bring in a veteran offensive coach into this room. Even if LaFleur was going to stay, they were going to do that. The guys that they've brought in so far that we've at least heard them connected to, other than Darrell Bevel, are all inexperienced coaches. You got Kevin Patullo, like you mentioned, Marcus Brady, who was a CFL coordinator a few years ago before joining the Colts. There's not, and then Nick Caley, of course, who does not have any experience above being a position coach in the NFL, or I think any level. It's a lot of inexperienced names. I'm sure there will be more added to the list, but any Jets fan hoping for a Frank Reich, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen either here. And obviously, the big thing I think, besides the coordinator to figure out here, is the quarterback situation here. And we know Woody Johnson went out here and basically was asked what are you going to do with the quarterback? If you need a quarterback, what are you going to do? When he basically said, I'll do whatever it takes. Yes, there's a salary cap, but I'll spend whatever to get a quarterback in here. So what do you think about what he had to say about that? Because there have been rumors that are floating on the internet that Woody was sort of meddling on behalf of Zach Wilson with the coaching staff.
Yeah, I mean, I think even if Woody does like Zach Wilson and he does believe he could still be a good quarterback, he even sees that Zach Wilson cannot be the starting quarterback entering 2023, and realistically, he shouldn't be the backup either. The Jets need to go big game hunting. Essentially, they need to go out there and get a quarterback that can take them to the playoffs. It's not going to be a Gardner Minshew. It's not going to be a Jacoby Brissett. It's going to be somebody that is a proven, capable quarterback at the NFL level, and somebody that they think that you can insert him onto this roster and they could win 10 games next year. Because Douglas knows it, Saleh knows it, their jobs are at stake. If the Jets don't improve and get to the playoffs in 2023, they're likely gone. So I think Woody is just kind of giving them the green light, essentially. Because like you mentioned, there's a salary cap. So it's not like this is, the MLB where he can just throw a bunch of money out there and sign whoever he wants. There's a salary cap, so you have to work around the restrictions of the salary cap. But either way, I think the Jets will go big game hunting, whether it's with Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, Lamar Jackson. It'll be someone like that.
Yeah, I think those three you mentioned are probably the three landing candidates here. And I think one thing that helps the Jets here is that, unlike the coordinator spot where, it could be 1 year and out, this is a nice spot for a quarterback to land here. You have some weapons in there. You have a friendly system in most cases here. You have talent around you. They have the ability to spend money. I feel like if you're a quarterback looking for a new home, the Jets probably pretty high on the list of teams at vacancies right now.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I think that the Jets, for the first time in what feels like a while, are an appealing landing spot for other quarterbacks out there. Not to mention, they have the desire and the will to go out and get somebody. And I think that definitely plays into it as well. I think it'll be interesting to see who the Jets hire an offensive coordinator and see kind of how that maybe dictates or at least lends or hints at who they might go after a quarterback. If, for example, if they go out and sign or hire Greg Olson away from the Rams, former Raiders offensive coordinator, that would probably hint that the Derek Carr is high on their radar. So I think that's another thing to keep in mind.
You sort of touched on the big three here. Obviously, the big name prior to, I think, all of the floor shuffling was Jimmy Garoppolo, because obviously he's the guy who fits in that system very well. He's led the 49ers to within a drive and a half, drive to a Super Bowl a couple of years ago. Now you wonder here. I mean, he's coming off the broken foot. I think he's still a good fit here, but I think a lot would depend on like what system they end up putting in if he's the guy.
Right. I do think that the LaFleur firing makes it less likely that they bring in Garoppolo. Like you mentioned, the system that they're running, I think it's going to depend a lot on who they bring in as their offensive coordinator. Right now, I'd say my money would be on Derek Carr. And I know, the red flags are obvious. He has a poor history of playing in cold weather. People say that his personality might not be a great fit for the New York market. He's never won a playoff game, I believe. Obviously the red flags are going to be out there, but at the same time, there's going to be red flags with whoever you're looking for the Jets to add. Like, they're not going to find a Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen out there. There are red flags with everybody. Derek Carr is a proven top 15 quarterback for the vast majority of his career. He's a good quarterback. He would be my pick. Garoppolo is still out there, and I think he's still an interesting option, especially because you wouldn't have to trade for him. You can just sign him. But it seems more likely to me that Carr is the top option right now.
Yeah, I'm on your side. I think Carr is most likely to be the quarterback here, barring some shenanigans with Jackson, which we'll get to in a minute here. But I think he's very divisive, the Jet fan. I mean, I'm in a group chat, several Jet fans. I'm the one Carr defender. There's a lot of people who are anti-Carr here for all the reasons you mentioned. But the way I look at it is, I think the situation over there has gotten very toxic for him, and I think the fit with McDaniels has not been very good. And sometimes we've seen how that New England system doesn't work for all quarterbacks here, and I think, some of these guys, breath of fresh air would help.
Oh, I totally agree. That's why I think the McDaniels connection, I think that's why Garoppolo makes more sense for Vegas at this stage. I think McDaniels kind of just wants to get his guy in there, somebody who has familiarity in that system. The Carr fit it didn't work. And the Raiders are obviously stuck in that McDaniels contract. He's not going anywhere. So it's his team now. It's him and Ziegler's team. So they're going to bring their guy in there. Carr is, I don't want to say being made the scapegoat, as more of they're just looking to move on and looking for a fresh change at the quarterback position. That doesn't mean that Carr's a bad quarterback. It means that the Raiders want something else. More specifically, Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler, they want something else. And I think that something else would make sense to Jimmy Garoppolo. Carr is a good quarterback. I'm with you on that. I very much like him on the Jets. There's a lot of Carr haters out there, and I get it. I do get it. He's not a perfect quarterback, but he's a good quarterback. I think he can get this team to the playoffs, and that's what's most important.
I feel there's a lot of Kirk Cousins vibes with Derek Carr. I feel like that's also turning a lot of fans off.
Definitely, especially with lack of success in the playoffs and everything, and he's just a good quarterback, not a great quarterback. That's fine. You don't have to have a great quarterback. The Jets, I think what's most important about this is that people will be like, oh, you're not going to win a Super Bowl with Derek Carr. And it's one, you don't know that. Jimmy Garoppolo was a quarter away from winning the Super Bowl. Two, that's not really your end. I don't think Derek Carr is your end goal if you're the Jets. Your end goal is not signing Derek Carr and being like, all right, he's the quarterback for the next 10 years. That's not your end goal. You bring Derek Carr in to stabilize the roster, stabilize the recurrent regime, get your team on the fringe of being a contender, and then maybe you pull a 49ers thing where you get a guy like Trey Lance in there. Obviously, that hasn't necessarily worked out for various reasons, but it's a scenario that you can have your stable quarterback, have your stable core foundation in there, and then maybe look at somebody down the road that you can get as your 10-year starter. But you don't have to throw him out there immediately like the Jets did with Zach Wilson. I think Derek Carr gives them that opportunity. It affords them that luxury of being able to do that.
Yeah, let's get to the white whale here, which is Lamar Jackson, because obviously, there's a lot of smoke coming out of Baltimore that made the Ravens aren't thrilled with him. We had him go on Twitter last week and talk about what his injury actually was, and his timetable, why he wasn't going to play. He doesn't go to the playoff game on the road. Team's trying to sign him, and now, as of recording here, we have odds books putting out, who are the teams that Lamar is going to play for. He's not playing for the Ravens. The Jets are the tops on that board here. I see the connection. Obviously, Joe Douglas works in the Baltimore front office. He's familiar with the guys down there. What do you think the odds are Lamar could be in play for the Jets?
I think it's definitely feasible. It seems more and more likely as the days go on that Lamar's time in Baltimore is coming to an end. That's not a guarantee that they're going to move on from him, but I think it is. I don't know if I'd put it at greater than 50% at this stage, but it's definitely higher than it was a week or two ago, or even a month ago. Obviously the whole Lamar situation deals with his contract situation. He wants a fully guaranteed deal, something similar to what Deshaun Watson received. The Ravens have been very hesitant to do that, at least in previous negotiations. I don't think Lamar budges on that. As for the Ravens, it would go very much against all of their organizational philosophies if they were to budge on that, which is why I think it's decently likely he's on the move. As the Jets, they're going to have plenty of competition for this. I know the teams like the Falcons, the Panthers, even the Patriots I've seen high on these lists. They're all going to be interested. And I think the biggest obstacle with Lamar is also timing, because if the Jets are wanting to go in like all in on Lamar Jackson, they can't really have Derek Carr as a fallback option, because the Carr situation really needs to be resolved by February 15th. That's when the Raiders need to make a decision on him. Unless he's cut, then you could potentially drag it out further. But if not, if you're trading for him and if there are teams lining up to trade for Carr, that's going to be resolved by February 15th. I don't think the Lamar Jackson situation is resolved by February 15th. So timing is an issue with that. But, I mean, if he's made available, the Jets will be interested. They will do what they can to, make a competitive offer.
Yeah, I think it does come down to acquisition costs these quarterbacks as well, because obviously Garoppolo is just going to be free agent. Just has spent money to get him and a contract offer here. Carr, I wouldn't be surprised he gets cut because he has leverage with the no trade clause, and they don't want to send a place he wants to go. I don't see a team absorbing that contract. He could go. Whereas Lamar, you got to put up multiple picks, maybe young players to outbid some of these teams for him. So that's another question I think for Joe Douglas. Also, like, I know you have to win right now. It's like, does it go against his principle of like, I'm going to bankrupt the entire draft catalog here for one quarterback?
Right. It would definitely be a very anti-Joe Douglas move, at least from what we've seen, to trade a ton of draft picks or a ton of draft capital. Now, it's an unprecedented situation for him because, one, it's a quarterback, and whenever there's a quarterback involved, that is a different situation entirely. But also, his back is against the wall. I think he knows he needs to do what he can to make this team succeed this year. Otherwise, his job is on the line. His job security is at an all-time low, essentially. And I think he realizes that. So it's an unprecedented situation. He may do unprecedented things as a result. I don't know. But I do think that, Carr would be more likely at this stage. Also, the timing, like I mentioned before, that plays a factor.
Yeah, it certainly is here. Let's go away from the quarterback for a minute. What else do you think they need to do in the offseason? Because obviously we saw some weaknesses in this roster down the stretch.
For sure. Yeah, this is definitely not a perfect roster. I think specifically on defense we can start. Safety is definitely a need. You need to get somebody in there that's an upgrade over LaMarcus Joyner. I do think they hold on to Jordan Whitehead, although he can be cut for a relatively reasonable price. But you need another free safety in there. I think that linebacker is definitely something that could be addressed. Quincy Williams and Quan Alexander are both free agents. They're going to have CJ Mosley next year. He was pretty good this year, definitely had a bounce-back season. But I'd like to get somebody alongside Mosley that is an upgrade, or at least a more consistent player than Quincy Williams. I do think they should bring back Quan Alexander because he was pretty good this year, but I do think that they definitely could upgrade at linebacker. Definitely need one at safety. As far as offense goes, offensive line is probably the biggest need. That's the one where you're looking at that first pick in the draft, and you're probably saying, all right, this is where the Jets add an offensive lineman. There's a lot of questions with that position group right now, and not a ton of answers. Elijah Vera Tucker's going to be back. Laken Tomlinson could be back in all likelihood. I don't think they can get out of that contract. Tackle is a complete question mark. We don't know what's going on with Dwayne Brown, with Mekhi Becton. We don't know if they're going to keep Vera Tucker there. A lot of question marks there. And then Connor McGovern's a free agent. So depending on what moves they make in free agency, if someone like Dwayne Brown retires or if they cut him, that will also open up some more spots. But I think offensive line is your big need there, as well as safety and linebacker.
Yeah, I agree with all of those here. I think offensive line was part of the discussion here because obviously they have a couple of tackle options here. Mekhi Becton looked slimmer when last time he was there. He said he's feeling good. And the rumors the Jets might put him back at left tackle. They have Elijah Vera Tucker can play pretty much anywhere on the line except center, so he can go pretty much anywhere they want here. I don't know if this a solid idea to just hand Becton left tackle again considering his injury history. Part one is if assuming the pick is not traded from Lamar Jackson, is you don't want to pick a left tackle, then you say Becton, Mitchell, okay, you guys are fighting for right tackle, and then we sort of fill in center and at free agency and Vera Tucker's a guard.
Sure. Yeah, it all depends on how they view Vera Tucker. It depends on what they think of Mekhi Becton's reliability. And, of course, it depends on what they do in draft. They have a ton of flexibility in there now, which is good because, I guess have the more flexibility you have. So it's really interesting to see what they do. I don't know what my preference would be. And I also agree with you. I don't think that they're going to just be like, hey, Mekhi Becton, the left tackle job is yours. I think that they're very open to drafting a left tackle in the first round. And honestly, it might be my top pick at this stage. So I don't think that Becton is necessarily guaranteed anything going into 2023. But it is encouraging that he's looking slimmer, that he appears more motivated. There's some optimism within the organization about Mekhi Becton, so that's promising. But, we'll see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, and obviously they have a lot of stuff to do, including find a way to pay whichever quarterback is coming here, but they only have $15 million salary cap space, and we know that you can do all sorts of things with salary cap you want. We've seen the Saints basically treat the cap as monopoly money for years and just get whatever they want done here, but, you have to make some moves here. What do you think could be happening in terms of, people getting cut, maybe getting restructured? What do you think they can play around to make more room on the cap?
Yeah, I mentioned Jordan Whitehead earlier. I think that it's possible that they cut him and move on, but I think it's more likely you see guys like Corey Davis and Carl Lawson. They're the first two that immediately come to mind. Lawson, I know he played through injury this past season. He had multiple Achilles surgeries, which is it's pretty wild. I had the Connor Hughes report that he was barely running before training camp started. That is, it's impressive that he even played all 17 games this season, but he does have a $15 million cap hit. You could pretty much cut him for free. I think it's possible you see a restructure there, but it's also possible that they just kind of cut him and give more snaps to guys like Bryce Huff, Mike Clemens, Jermaine Johnson. As for Corey Davis, yeah, that's another situation where I think that he's definitely either going to be restructured or cut. I don't think he comes back on his contract. I believe it's an $11 million cap hit, and they can cut him for less than $1 million in dead cap. So it seems likely that they make a move there. Others, John Franklin Myers, they can potentially cut or restructure. Braxton Berrios, I think it would make sense to move on from him. I don't think he's worth his 5, 6, 7, whatever it's going to be. I think it's like $7 or $8 million cap hit next year. I don't think he's worth that. So they have flexibility there as well, because that's the way Joe Douglas builds rosters. They have a lot of flexibility. They can make a lot of moves, and they're probably going to have to.
I would also agree. I would also say Dwayne Brown's probably in that category too. I feel like he's either to retire or to be cut. I don't think there's any way he's back next year with the Jets.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I do think his dead cap is, I think it's around like $5 or $6 million. So it's a higher number than you'd like. But if he retires, it really doesn't matter anyway. I think there's a chance that he is brought back. I don't think it's like a formality or a guarantee that he's gone. He also played through injury this year. He did play the entire season with one shoulder. So that also needs to be taken into account with him. But he's definitely somebody that they can look to potentially move on from as well.
All right, my last question here is this. Obviously, we talked about Woody Johnson earlier. He basically was asked again the question about playoff mandate. He said, I don't have a mandate, but I get the fans are frustrated. They're optimistic. I talked in the parking lot. I don't know what fans he's talking to, but I'll say that. We'll say that for another discussion here. But knowing his history here, and that this year, next year would be year 5 for Douglas, year 3 for Saleh. If they miss the playoffs again, it's 13 years in a row, and barring something where it's not their fault, like everybody in the roster is injured, do you think they're gone if they miss the playoffs again?
Yeah, I'd say they would need a really good reason if for why they miss the playoffs if they do in 2023 to be back. I think that even though Woody Johnson hasn't come out and specifically said, "Hey, here's a playoff mandate," which, by the way, I agree with. I don't think that playoff mandates are a thing that should exist. There's always context to every situation. Like you said, if they go out and get Derek Carr gets hurt in the preseason, and then they finish 9-8. It's hard to be like, okay, well, now everybody should be fired because they play with a backup quarterback the entire year. So obviously there's context to everything. But assuming that the roster is healthy enough, right? Everybody gets injuries, but healthy enough, and they miss the playoffs, say they finish, 8-9, 9-8, whatever it is. Yeah, I think that there's a good chance that the Jets do decide to start over. Now, it all depends on the context. It's hard to even, sit here now and say what's going to happen 10 months from now, 11 months from now. But the Jets need to see signs of improvement. More than just signs of improvement, they need to see actual improvement. They need to see this team make the playoffs. And if they don't, yeah, I think that people's jobs are going to be on the line, even if Woody Johnson hasn't specifically said that.
Yeah, I mean, that plus the fact that, what's going on at teams like Cincinnati, where they go from first pick in the draft, the Super Bowl in 2 years, the Jaguars this year, the Giants, for crying out loud, with Brian Dale, one of the worst routes in the league from Joe Judge, and taking to at least a divisional round team. I started at some point ways to say here, hey, why is it taking me 13 years to get back to the playoffs?
Exactly. You rebuild in the NFL. I know that the Joe Douglas way is kind of the slow build, just kind of construct the core and hopefully just keep the cap situation good, keep your draft assets good. But I know that that's his way of building a roster, but you need to see results in the field. I think that Joe Douglas has done a lot of good for the organization, but he's missed on quarterback, and I think that's the big thing. There's no reason that this Jets roster with a competent quarterback should not make the playoffs in 2023. And if they don't, people's jobs will be on the line, and they should be.
Absolutely, Justin. Thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, people follow social media, keep up with some of your coverage for the Jet Press.
Sure, man. Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Justin T. Freeze. You can follow the Jet Press at the Jet Press on Twitter. We also just came out with a Jet Press podcast, which is very fun. So you can find that on YouTube, on our YouTube page of the Jet Press, and on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Absolutely. Be sure to check that out, Justin. Thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me on, Mike.